Serious, those of you who have been disowned, what was your side of the story? My ex-wife, who cheated on me with a close friend from my job during quarantine, was stuck at home with my family for months while I was working. Apparently, she'd been crying and making up sob stories to convince my family that I had cheated on her. When I found out I'd been cheated on, she told me I wanted to make the divorce clean and didn't tell my family what happened. 2 months later, I moved for work and found out that they're still great friends with her, and all believe that I was the cheater. The only blood relative who believes me is my youngest sister. Shit's depressing. Thank you guys, I really appreciate the support. Haven't had much since it went down. I was told by my mother that my general existence causes more problems than it solves, and I had 2 weeks to either leave or kill myself. She didn't care what I chose to do, but if I killed myself, I needed to make it look like an accident, or she couldn't collect on my life insurance. She decided this needed to happen because I'm disabled. My mom decided when I was 13 to 14 that she didn't want to have kids anymore. She and my dad divorced. So, my dad moved out of the family house, and my mom was newly single. So, she gets my sister out first by asking my sister to go away to stay with our dad for the weekend. When my sister came back, my mom had packed all her items in boxes and said, "Find somewhere else to live." My sister was maybe 15. Her reasoning is she didn't like the crowd my sister was running with. With me, I stuck around longer. I took more abuse and neglect. My mom didn't cook, clean, or have food in the house. And despite getting child support, if I asked for shoes or anything, ask your father, don't ask me. Despite not having food or money, she wouldn't give me the alarm code to the house, or a key. I could only come home if she was home. One day she agreed to drive my friends and me to the movies. Well, she and I got into a small argument about something in the morning, I don't remember what, and I left and arrived home in the afternoon. She was home but wouldn't let me in. I was a 13-14-year-old kid, before cell phones were that commonplace. Ringing the bell, peering in the windows. She wouldn't let me in. Finally, I found an open window and climbed through, and she coldly looked at me and said, "You know, I could have arrested you for breaking into the house if I wanted to." I went to live with my dad shortly thereafter. She moved away to live with a guy she met on the internet. Sponsored him to come into the country with his 12-year-old son. By the time I was 16, she was married and moved the guy in, and bought his son new video games, travel allowance, and his own apartment when he was a teenager, and wouldn't even buy me shoes. Well, she gave this guy access to her bank account, and he took all her money. Her entire life savings. All her money in the world. She lost her house and became homeless. My sister took her in at the time. My mom eventually got back on her feet a little bit and got a job. I tried to repair the relationship and be nice. Never for long. Finally, she had some kind of mental breakdown a few years ago when I was in my early 30s. And she called my office demanding I help her. Something happened at work where her mental health went sideways, and she started behaving very erratically. For some reason, when she called my colleague speaking nonsensically and rambling about me, my colleague decided to give her my number to take it up with me myself. My colleague said she felt bad after. So, I tried to help my mom, and spent all this time talking to her boss, her union rep, her neighbors, and her doctor, trying to help her. And she just kept going crazy and being abusive, not willing to accept my help. I washed my hands off her. So, she disowned me when she got a better family, and then I tried to help her, but she tried to take me down with her. I've never gotten a solid explanation since they don't talk to me anymore, but my cousins stopped having anything to do with me as soon as my aunt died. As in literally the day after the funeral. I was very close to my aunt and loved visiting with her, calling her to check in, having her over for dinner, etc. But I always had the distinct impression that my cousins didn't like it for some reason. I didn't understand why since she saw them every week, so it's not like I was taking her away from them or asking her for anything. I never asked my aunt about it, since I didn't want to upset her. About a year before she died, she told me that I was one of her own. What a shame that her children never felt the same way. I can't tell whether or not I've been disowned, nor do I care, but I personally have long ago disowned my relatives. They're manipulative, racist, abusive, and overall bigoted. To make a long story short, if they were to disown me, it's because I'm the exact opposite of them. Because a lot of weirdos are sending me threatening and harassing messages. I'm black and Irish Scot, my mum is black, my dad is Irish, and I was born in Ireland, but moved to Scotland and got citizenship. I am very visibly black. My not supporting my relatives spewing hateful and derogatory slurs at other minorities doesn't mean I support white genocide, or am trying to erase European beauty standards. Cease and desist from this bullshit. Your racism and savior complexes are showing. Because a lot of racists are finding this post and calling my dad a traitor for marrying and having kids outside his race, all I have to say is you're fucking weird. Get a life, LMAO. Mom saw that I'd worn some of her clothes while she was in another province for work. I came home to her screaming that I'd sold thousands of dollars of her clothing to my high school friends. We were so poor we had to steal food. Nobody bought any clothes, and nobody stole them lol. She then said she was going to destroy everything I owned, and in a panic, I hid in my room and put the dresser against the door. She started throwing herself against it, and I was terrified to realize she was going to get in. My lava lamp fell, I caught it, and threw it when she forced the door open. She screamed, I jumped out a window and ran barefoot to a friend's house. She called the police accusing me of trying to murder her. I turned myself in and told the police that I did assault her, and would accept any charges. They released me to my friend's house and told my mom that they'd charge her with child abandonment if she kept pushing. Her ex-best friend drove 4 days to get me. She signed over the ownership papers, and I've had an amazing dad ever since. I don't consider myself disowned, but I have been cut off from seeing my younger siblings. I've pretty much disowned certain family members myself. My mother, 50, has been abusing her position of EPOA for my Alzheimer's adult grandmother, 80, via extortion, and unlike everybody else, I choose to hold the bitch accountable for her actions, because her selfish actions lead to my nana nearly needing her feet amputated from having lack of medical care and attention. I told everyone what she was doing and nothing happened. No one wants to prosecute her because apparently legal fees are more important than getting my grandmother justice. So, essentially, I was disowned for exposing her extortion. My biological father is an abusive alcoholic, but also super Christian. And super redneck conservative. He gave up his rights when I was 4, which my mom always told me was for the best. After I found out I was pregnant, he added me on social media and saw where I had shared some posts with pro-choice views. I guess it bothered him because he blocked me lol. My dad. It was mostly my decision because we used to do hard drugs when I was a kid. Growing up I thought it was normal until friends found out and told me they were worried about me. I first overdosed when I was 14 from drugs he gave me, and let me just say it was all downhill from there. I'm 13 years sober now, but I kicked him out of my life around the same time. My dad still says horrible things about me and his whole family believes him, so I cut them all out. It's definitely for the better as I have created my own family with supportive friends. Screw that mess. My 90-plus-year-old grandma has dementia now. Apparently, she disowned some male person at some time in her life, and now she gets confused about who exactly she disowned. So, there are days when it's me who was disowned. Sometimes it's one of my brothers, or cousins, or uncles. We all just take turns being disowned for a day. It was tough at first, but now we all find it pretty amusing and just a natural part of caring for a senior family member. My mother is a QAnon conspiracy nut job. I called her out on her delusions. I told her I thought her ideology was dangerous and that she needed help. We fought, and even went to family therapy together. My dad sat in on the sessions, and after a few sessions, he texted me saying that it wasn't going anywhere, and that they didn't want to speak with me again. My parents have been bad-mouthing me to the rest of my very conservative family. I don't know what to do or where to go. I understand how terrible my parents are, but my kids aren't, and they are going to miss their grandparents. I'm not looking forward to telling them. Wow, so where to begin? My family is very traditional even by our culture's standards. I grew up thinking that my family was Americanized, and that the women in my family were shattering the glass ceiling, and things couldn't get any better, because we were allowed to wear pants, were required to finish high school, allowed to go to college if we had the money ourselves, and we weren't sold off for marriage. My generation even grew up being called and thinking of ourselves as liberated because we had options beyond being housewives. Even though I saw all these things as amazing freedoms thanks to living in American life, I still wanted more. I wanted to be able to leave the house on my own. I wanted to hang out with friends. I wanted to question things. I wanted to move away, live and work wherever I wanted, and I wanted privacy, even if it was just a lock on a door. So, I was a difficult child as my family put it, and that turned into being a rebellious teen, especially when I started seeing a lot of the other freedoms other girls at my school had. When I turned 18, I was kicked out, and by 19 I had met my husband and my family didn't approve. They eventually told me that could either be allowed back into the family or could be with him and get disowned, so I chose him and ended up moving across the country without anyone knowing. I didn't hear from my family, except my grandma, for about 2 years. Then a family friend I kept in touch with ended up telling my family that my life was going really well. My mom started to contact me when she heard, but it took over 6 years for the rest of my family to even acknowledge that I was even alive. It wasn't until my husband D, and I hit our 9th anniversary that my family saw what my husband's competition was. Then they started to treat us like people want to start talking to us and building relations with us. I keep in touch with a few of my family members, but I keep them at arm's length. I gave up the possibility of any meaningful family bonds a long time ago, and the communication now is mostly surface-level cordialness. My parents treated some family friends very poorly and had a falling out with that family. A long series of accusations followed where my parents falsified information about this family and slandered their name, constantly accusing them of things I personally knew to not be true because I was physically present at the time. I always tried to avoid the topic and stay out of it, but one day my mother essentially cornered me and demanded to know how I felt. I was blunt and honest with her, that I didn't agree with what they were doing, and that I thought they were mistreating this family, and they were not right. My mom lost her shit and called me a traitor to the family for not siding with them, my family. I told her my feelings were about truth and honesty, not loyalty. She kicked me out of the house right then and there and told me not to come back. I received a letter signed by both my parents later on. In the letter they called me a disappointment and a failure and disowned me, saying I wasn't welcome to be part of the family until I apologized for my egregious behavior. The real tragedy of this is that it happened while my wife was pregnant with our first child, which would be their first grandchild. It has now been almost 3 years and I have never heard from them, and they have never met their only granddaughter. My mom's plan to divorce my dad, take his house, and live off the child support money evaporated when I turned 13 and started eating like the teenage boy I was. Mom hadn't planned on that much of an outlay, so she wasn't making a dime off my presence any longer. Because she no longer had any use for me, out I went at age 13. The joke's on her, I'm successful now, and when my younger brother had to stop giving her money due to his financial crisis job loss, guess who called to reconcile? I never returned her call. Where do I start? My mother and I have never gotten along. As a child, she has been overly critical of me, Asian parent. Even when I was small, I remember her telling my dad, if she can't even cut in a straight line, what can she even do? I was 5 when she said that. When she realized that I was not going to grow up like she did or have the interests she wanted me to have, she grew more critical of me. She laid off a bit when my little sister came around and she favored her more. I always felt like I was never enough in her eyes. She only was affectionate during family get-togethers, vacations, or sometimes in public. When I came out of the closet, she didn't believe me. She always said lightheartedly that she would love me no matter what, but when push came to shove, my bi-ness was just a phase. We then went to church for the next few months afterward. I was Catholic. When I had depression in my teens, each time she picked me up from therapy, she always kept asking, when am I going to be okay, or hinting at how much my sessions are while on antidepressants. She then cheated on my dad when I was around 18. When I had my son, she came to be supportive after the birth, but ended up criticizing how dirty my place was, and my parenting, and subtly hinted at calling CPS. Postpartum hit hard, and a failed suicide attempt ensued. What broke the camel's back was I was visiting family and her mother's partner kept on making me uncomfortable. Kept trying to don my child with a certain political hat and took a video of her saying political stuff I was not okay with. Kept saying I was uncomfortable but was told, you need to take the stick out of your ass, or you need to learn to take a joke. The behavior still continued. Then a big confrontation happened, and she denied everything about my childhood. My mother said she can't control her partner. He does what he wants despite us telling her it was not okay. She then started and begged for me to get help. I am mentally broke. I'm in therapy now, but right now I don't know if I can take it if something like this happens again. I am just thankful for my support system now. I'm probably missing some stuff, but at this moment I'm thankful for who I have in my life and that I'm alive. I was disowned, but probably by my own choice. My father died when I was 18. I gave up college to look after him and drove him to the hospital every other day for tests. He went to hypo sessions. I would sit for hours waiting for him. I did it all. My brother was never to be seen. He was away living his life. Mother was a heavy drinker. I still lived at home, my brother didn't. I was left to put up with drunk abuse from my mum losing her husband of 30 years. I looked the double of my dad, so for some reason, she took it out on me. Or this is what people told me. I changed locks on me after coming home from work all the time, and I was stuck. Claimed I was stealing from her. Telling everyone lies about me was horrible. Nightly abuse, shouting at me, accusing me of nonsense while drunk. I tried to help, but she didn't want to know. Used to call the police on me, claiming all sorts of. They would turn up to see my mum being drunk and me in my room chilling and tell her off. It was very toxic. My brother wasn't interested. He was 4 years older than me and just didn't care. Never visited me or my mum. I begged for help, and he was just a coward. One day a friend had a room come up for rent, so I packed stuff and just left. She was shocked. But it was the best thing. I used to try to keep in touch, but just got abused. Drunken phone calls and threats. I was 21 at this point and was expecting a child with my partner, so I decided I had had enough. I cut all the ties. Cue my brother realizing my mum had lots of money from my dad's retirement and life insurance. Becomes my mum's best friend. She buys him everything. Effectively making a deal with the devil. And is scared to talk to me in case she finds out. Long story short, years later turns out my mum had throat cancer. He just didn't tell me about until she choked and died suddenly one day. And I get left a voicemail telling me as much. Attended the funeral through gritted teeth. And then found out I was nowhere on the will. And my brother got the lot. A substantial amount. And I never heard from him again to this day. It's been 5 years since my mum died, and he just vanished. I was told I could fight it, but that wasn't me. I was never about the money, unlike my brother. And I live hoping he comes knocking one day and needs a kidney, so I can tell him to go away kindly. Family and money are horrible situations. And I live daily thinking I did something wrong, and I can't put my finger on what it was to be treated this way. It haunts me, and has left me with many issues. The wrong family member died first. My dad was a gentleman, and looking back put up with horrible abuse from my mum. I was like my dad and my brother was like my mum. My dad and I were talking about the then brand new Iraq War, spring 2003, and that went alright until the discussion turned to the Vietnam War. I didn't and don't support a draft, and I don't remember what exactly I said because I was 14 then, but it was something to the effect of I understand why some people around here dodged to Canada. He got super pissed and said he'd disown me, and he'd disown me if I ever dodged a draft. He said he was just slightly too young to have gone to Vietnam, but he would gladly serve like his dad did in Korea. He was never in the military or any adjacent field, and neither was my mom or brother or any extended family except the 2 grandpas. I never was when I got older. The weirdest thing is that he has no recollection of that at all. Everything was normal, shitty but normal, the next day. It was one of the first big things that made me stop loving him, the others being him slapping my mom, and later him threatening me with a knife, but we are at least friendly with each other, him I think from genuine affection and me from duty.